The search for survivors of the blast in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, continues as the government declared a state of emergency for the next 2 weeks. Brazil's Supreme Federal Court is still evaluating a ruling that would compel President Jair Bolsonaro to protect indigenous peoples during the coronavirus pandemic. The Pan American Health Organization has warned that the COVID-19 pandemic is having a devastating effect on the treatment of other diseases in the region. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. The search for survivors of the blast in the Lebanese capital, Beirut, this Tuesday continues as the government declared a state of emergency for the next 2 weeks. International aid has already begun arriving in Lebanon following the devastating blasts that plunged the country further into crisis. Over 100 deaths have been reported, while the number of people missing surpasses the casualties so far. Thousands were wounded as the shockwave of the explosions caused damage to buildings across half of the city. According to reports, the explosion was felt as far away as Cyprus, around 150 miles northwest of the country. The governor of Beirut, Maran Aboud, described the disaster as an apocalyptic situation and estimated that at least 300,000 people were made temporarily homeless and that the recovery efforts would cost the country over $3 billion US. And following a visit to the site of the explosions in the port of Beirut, the Lebanese president and cabinet members held a minute of silence for the victims before holding a meeting at the presidential palace.
No words can describe the horror of the disaster that has hit Beirut last night, turning it to a disaster-stricken city. It is time to grieve for our martyrs, wounded and missing. There is no doubt that shock is tremendous among all the Lebanese, to whom I appeal today to show solidarity and mutual assistance in order for us to overcome, together, the catastrophic effects that go way beyond Lebanon's endurance during the harsh economic and health circumstances under which it succumbs.
On Wednesday, the Iranian Red Crescent Society loaded a plane with humanitarian aid for the Lebanese people. The plane is carrying much-needed medical supplies, a medical team and a field hospital to help tackle the emergency sparked by the blast that occurred in Beirut on Tuesday afternoon. The NGO announced that this was the first of a series of humanitarian aid shipments to be sent to Lebanon.
In regards to what happened yesterday in Beirut, the first shipment of Iranian aid weighing more than 95 tons, including medical items, medical equipment, food, a field hospital, and a medical team of 30 people, will be sent to Beirut.
And Tehran's Asadi Tower lit up with the Lebanese flag and messages of support from Iran to the Lebanese people after the devastating explosion at Beirut port, which wreaked destruction across the city. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has offered condolences and medical support to the Arab nation. And on Wednesday afternoon, the Russian government also sent humanitarian aid in response to the explosions in the Lebanese capital. The Russian Ministry of Emergency said that 5 aircraft were sent carrying humanitarian aid to alleviate the consequences of the disaster. In the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Russian government also sent epidemiology specialists, along with a mobile laboratory, to carry out COVID-19 tests on site. Russian President Vladimir Putin sent his condolences to Lebanon's President Michel Aoun. Meanwhile, Senator Oleg Morozov pointed out that Russia is willing to help Lebanon investigate the accident if it receives such a request. And Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel sent his condolences to the Lebanese president following the deaths of at least 100 people and the wounding of thousands. The message expressed the Cuban people's solidarity with the victims and their families. And Qatar sent an aircraft carrying a field hospital and medical aid to Lebanon to help alleviate the mounting pressure on its strained healthcare system in the wake of the blast that devastated Beirut. And we'll be right back after this short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Brazil, the ruling which compels President Jair Bolsonaro to protect indigenous peoples during the coronavirus pandemic is still being evaluated by the Supreme Federal Court. Judges of the top judicial body have pointed out that the indigenous population of Brazil is protected by the constitutional framework. In view of this, the plenary of the Supreme Court has requested the implementation of health measures to guarantee attention and services for the different indigenous communities of the country hit by the effects of the pandemic. However, the court will hold further sessions to determine whether the Bolsonaro government can be forced to comply with these obligations. And the Supreme Court of Brazil ruled to withdraw the complaint made by former Finance Minister Antonio Palocci against former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The move came following a request from Lula's defence team, who argued that the complaint was made 6 days before the first round of the 2018 presidential elections and used by then federal judge Sergio Moro, which represented a violation of impartiality. The Brazilian Workers' Party, Lula's political platform, and the defence attorney have stressed that this was further evidence of Moro's political agenda against Lula. The former judge was named Minister of Justice by President Jair Bolsonaro on entering office. Indigenous organisations of the Amazon Basin and Ecuador have launched an international campaign to stop extraction in the Amazon, which seeks to protect the environment and the livelihoods of these communities.
Today we are here to demand justice for our community. We are facing again the impacts of the oil spread and the landslides.
The United States Senate Committee on Foreign Relations held a hearing on Venezuela this Tuesday to address the Trump administration policy towards the country. The committee called the U.S. Special Representative for Venezuela, Elliot Abrams, to answer questions on policy towards Venezuela, who admitted his implication in the actions to destabilize Venezuela and overthrow the government of President Nicolas Maduro. Meanwhile, Senator Chris Murphy criticized the special representative for not being successful in his task, thus confirming once again the United States' participation in the attempted coup of 2019.
It didn't work. And it's just been an embarrassing mistake after mistake since. First, we thought that getting Guaido to declare himself president would be enough to topple the regime. Then we thought putting aid on the border would be enough. Then we tried to sort of construct a kind of coup in April of last year, and it blew up in our face when all the generals that were supposed to break with Maduro decided to stick with him in the end. We undermined Norway's talks last summer, and then this March we released a transition framework that frankly is almost a carbon copy of the very one that was in front of the parties last year. And now, after wasting all of this time, we are stuck with elections about to happen that, as we have talked about today, Guaido and the opposition refuse to enter. And then we are going to be in a position where we are recognizing someone as the leader of Venezuela who doesn't control the government, who doesn't run the military, and who doesn't.
And Venezuela has rejected the statements made by the United States Special Representative Elliot Abrams and senators who attended the hearing of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Upper House, where they reiterated support for illegal interference in Venezuela's internal affairs. During the hearing held on Tuesday, Abrams reiterated his support for coup tactics and opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido, as did other Republican senators, although some questioned the success of Donald Trump's hand-picked representative. The Venezuelan government rejected the accusations made against it and once again condemned the coercive and illegal measures unilaterally imposed by Washington. Meanwhile, Democratic representatives criticized Abrams' historic failure on Venezuela. According to Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, the Latin American Biotechnology Institute located in Managua, Nicaragua, represents the flagship project of his country's cooperation with Latin America and the Caribbean. The diplomat's statements came in the framework of the virtual conference on constructive cooperation post-COVID-19. The Deputy Minister also highlighted Russia's commitment to multilateralism, mutual cooperation, peace and international security. Meanwhile, Nicaraguan Vice President Rosario Murillo indicated that the Mechnikov Biotechnology Institute has the qualified personnel and technology to produce any type of vaccine, including to prevent COVID-19. In an interview with Telesur, PhD in Law and Political Sciences, Jaime Zuliaga has explained that the house arrest warrant issued by Colombia's Supreme Court of Justice against former President Álvaro Uribe strengthens the autonomy and the independence of the country's judicial system.
And it is very important in the country's current situation, where the court was subject to a series of political pressures by the Democratic Center Party and by other sectors of Colombian society, warning of the possible consequences if a measure of this nature was implemented. What the court has done in an unanimous decision by ordering former President Uribe to be put under house arrest is an assertion of the autonomy and independence of the Supreme Court of Justice, and this is undoubtedly a step forward in the institutional strengthening of the country.
Peru is the second hardest hit South American nation by the novel coronavirus, having now reported over 20,000 COVID-19 fatalities. Hospitals are struggling to cope with the rising number of patients, and healthcare workers have protested against the lack of protective equipment. According to the Ministry of Health, almost 7,000 new cases were reported over a 24-hour period, bringing the total to almost 440,000. And Peru is facing yet another political crisis as the Congress refused to approve the new cabinet of Prime Minister Pedro Cateriano, forcing President Martin Vizcarra to draw up a new ministerial team in no more than 72 hours.
With respect to the law, as I have always been since the beginning of my government, and according to Article 133 of the Constitution, I accept the Congress decision, and in accordance, I will define a new cabinet in the time that the law establishes.
Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel has announced a popular campaign against illegal acts that are further damaging the economy in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic and the ongoing blockade imposed by the United States. The president stressed that illegal activities in the midst of scarcities such as hoarding and the reselling of essential goods would be tackled through the joint efforts of his government and the Cuban people, who reject such acts on the part of a minority seeking to gain from the complicated and difficult economic situation the island currently faces.
It is not out of hatred or to disturb, but to prevent a few from disturbing the many. That is the objective with which we do these things, and of course, where it is not adopted, where it is confronted, and where legality is disrespected, we are going to act with all fairness but also firmly, because the streets of Cuba are for revolutionaries and for the working people. And to those who believe that with this situation they will speak of us, actually, we can guarantee that their plans and desires to destabilize the situation of the country and the revolution will be defeated or are already being defeated by the actions of the people, without giving in to pressure or blackmail or protest by those who want to annex the Cuban homeland to the savage north. And this is the legitimate way we are going to act against these demonstrations that are unwanted in our society.
Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, Ambassador Erin LaRocque, congratulated Dr. Irfan Ali on taking office as Guyana's 9th president. The official said he looks forward to meeting the new president at the next conference of CARICOM heads of government. Dr. Ali took the presidential oath after his People's Progressive Party was declared winner of Guyana's March 2nd general elections following an extended period of challenges. The CARICOM Secretary General assured that the people of Guyana have entrusted the new president with their leadership in a complicated context for the country's economic future. He also offered full support on behalf of the Caribbean community for the government and people of Guyana in their efforts to ensure a prosperous and secure future for the country. Now we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Pan American Health Organization has warned that the COVID-19 pandemic is having a devastating effect on the treatment of other diseases in the region. Dr. Carissa Etienne, director of the PAHO, issued the warning during an international press conference. She stressed that there are already warning signs of the lasting effect that the pandemic will have on health in the region, highlighting the suspension of vaccination campaigns, problems with pregnancy care and the treatment of non-communicable diseases, as well as shortages of drugs to treat HIV and tuberculosis.
The pandemic is also not the only health issue that we face. We are beginning to see warning signs of the devastating impact that the pandemic has had on other diseases.
Tropical storm Isaias pounded the east coast of the United States on Tuesday with heavy rain and strong winds, cutting power to over 3.1 million homes, and has now reached Canada, downgraded to a post-tropical cyclone. At least 4 people died as a result of the storm. Wind gusts up to 78 miles per hour wreaked havoc across eastern states of the US, littering streets with debris, closing roads and forcing the cancellation of scores of flights. Public transport services were also briefly suspended, including New York's famous Staten Island ferry. Isaias quickly moved up the east coast after slamming into the coast of North Carolina on Monday night with hurricane-strength winds before being downgraded to a tropical storm. The governor of the U.S. state of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, has announced steps to combat racism, which she's described as a public health crisis.
Signed an executive order to create the Black Leadership Advisory Council of Michigan, which I will work closely with to develop our policies and paths to opportunity for Black Michiganders. Today, I also signed an executive directive declaring racism as a public health crisis in Michigan. I want to thank the Michigan Legislative Black Council for their leadership. This pandemic has confirmed and highlighted the deadly nature of these pre-existing inequities caused by systemic racism. We have a lot of work to do to eradicate the systemic racism that Black Americans have faced for generations. And it's going to take time. But the most important thing we can do during this time is work closely with leaders across the state in every community to find the root cause of problems and work to eradicate them.
A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson has stressed that a visit by a top U.S. cabinet member to Taiwan was endangering peace and stability in the region as relations between the two powers continue to deteriorate.
China firmly opposes official exchanges between the U.S. and Taiwan, and this position is consistent and clear. China has lodged solemn representations with the U.S. side in Beijing and Washington. The Taiwan issue is the most important and sensitive issue in Sino-U.S. relations. The One China principle is the political foundation of Sino-U.S. relations. We urge the U.S. to abide by the One China principle and the provisions of the 3 Sino-U.S. joint communiques, stop all forms of official exchanges with Taiwan, handle Taiwan-related issues prudently and properly, and refrain from sending any wrong signals to the Taiwan independence forces, in order to avoid seriously damaging Sino-U.S. relations as well as peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait.
A day before the 75th anniversary of the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, the United Nations has urged all member states to sign the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. The Executive Secretary of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, Lacina Serbo, called on the international community to remain optimistic about the eventual ratification of the treaty and committed to its entry into force. He also praised the survivors of the bombings as a powerful moral compass for humanity. Serbo said that their pain and their stories have made the nuclear risk more perceptible and concrete, and stressed that we must hear them in order to act.
The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty is a powerful. 75th anniversary comes at a critical moment. Our global values and principles are under scrutiny, and past gains towards a more stable and peaceful world are under threat. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty is a powerful tool to achieve a world free of nuclear weapons. The Ibakusha have taught us that patience, determination and resolution are indispensable in the long battle towards nuclear disarmament. We must finish what we started, because what happened in Japan must never happen again.
Heavy rains and flooding in the capital of South Korea have left 13 people dead and forced more than 1,000 to leave their homes. The Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters reported that over 200 mudslides were registered in the city of Seoul and low-lying areas. The current monsoon season, South Korea's longest in 7 years, hit the country with 42 consecutive days of rain and left almost 6,000 hectares underwater, as well as highways and bridges in the capital. Scientists have linked the current extreme monsoon season to climate change, which has also caused extensive damages in China, Thailand, Myanmar and India. Angola's government reported another 64 COVID-19 cases on Tuesday, noting the growing spread of the coronavirus in Luanda province. According to the National Director of Public Health, 58 of the 64 new cases are people from different districts of Luanda, which has reported a large number of locally transmitted infections. The remaining patients are from the northern province of Serre. One further COVID-19 fatality was also reported in the capital, bringing the death toll to 59. Meanwhile, authorities reported 27 new recoveries, bringing the total to over 500. Angola has confirmed a total of over 1,300 coronavirus cases since the beginning of the outbreak. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesoenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and on our YouTube channel. For Teleso English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.